Governor Patrick Morrisey visited Raleigh County, West Virginia today as he hopes to get an across-the-board income tax cut approved by the West Virginia House of Delegates. Morrisey said during his speech that even though West Virginia has done tax cuts in the past, they have not kept up the same pace as other states. Morrisey says with the tax cut, they can assure that businesses and individuals see West Virginia as a state with great opportunities to succeed. Morrisey hopes that the Senate and House can eventually make the tax cut a reality.
Why shouldn't we be returning surplus money back to the people? Does anyone have a good answer for that? I don't. That's why I'm so passionate about this across-the-board income tax cut. So now, the tough work of getting the House and Senate together is really underway.
Morrisey adds this is an important step to follow President Donald Trump's lead to have an across-the-board reduction on income tax rates.